Hi everyone, my name is Karen, this is my channel RatherBeReading, and today I'm bringing to you my marked as to read video for February 2016. So since I last posted a marked as to read video, which is something I just started last month, where I talk about all the books that I have marked as to read, since then I have marked a further 18 books as to read on Goodreads because apparently I really have a problem. So let's just jump straight in and I'll talk to you about what those 18 books are that I've marked and what I think about them and why I was excited to read them. The first 3 books that I have to talk about were actually books that I saw on one of the Goodreads newsletters that I got. I think it was just the general February, just general one for that month that I got, and I looked at some of the books on there and 3 of them really struck my fancy, so I will talk about those first. The first of those books is The Forgetting Time by Sharon Guskin. This is a book that I think was described as being a psychological thriller. I can't actually recall. I did try to take better notes this month on where I'd heard about these books so I could let you guys know. I believe that this book follows a woman who gets a call to come to school to pick up her son, that they need to talk to her about her son and that it's a real emergency, and that somehow leads to her and this man having to go see the mother of a little boy who's been missing for 7 years or something like that. I'm not really too sure. It's a bit vague. I don't really understand exactly what's going to happen with this book, but it did sound really interesting, and so I was definitely interested to pick it up. The next is The Widow by Fiona Barton. This is a book that I believe is about a woman whose husband was suspected of committing a crime. I'm not sure what that crime was, but I understand that she's always kept really kind of silent on the topic, or always said the right things about her husband's accusations against him, but that then her husband dies, and that after her husband dies, she begins to speak a bit more openly, I think, about the crimes which he was suspected of committing. I don't know, it just sounded really interesting. That synopsis just really intrigued me, and so I marked it as to read. The last of those books from the newsletter is Try Not to Breathe by Holly Seddon. This is a book that I believe follows a woman who is battling alcoholism, and she starts to investigate a mystery surrounding a girl who went missing for 3 days when she was very young, and then she turned up 3 days later, but she was in a coma, and she's been in a coma for about 15 years. And I believe this woman who's battling alcoholism starts to kind of delve into that mystery and try solve it. Again, it just sounded really interesting, and I thought it would be something I might like to read. The next book that I marked as to read is The Other Woman by Jade Lee Wright. This is a book that is actually written by Jade from Boho Bookworm. I marked this as to read because I would really like to support her and read her book. She has actually supplied me with an e-copy of the book for me to read and review, so I should definitely be getting to that in March. So that's really exciting. I just really would like to support any booktubers who write books, and it sounds like something that I might enjoy. It, I believe, follows a woman I think she may be in an abusive relationship, but I think maybe the man's married or something like that. It's called The Other Woman. So yeah, it just definitely sounds interesting, and I can't wait to read it and support Jade. The next book I marked as to read is Slade House by David Mitchell. This is a book that I actually first saw on Chapter Stacks' channel, and it intrigued me a little there, but then I actually ended up seeing it in store when I was in a bookstore, but it was really expensive. It was like over $30, and I just could not justify spending that much on it. But I did mark it as to read based on that. I believe this is about a kind of, I don't think it's a haunted house, but it's kind of a strange, different house that only appears at certain times. Like, you can only enter it. Like, it's not always, the door's not always there, and then I think once you go in, you can't leave. I don't know, it just sounded really interesting. It really intrigued me when I read the flap on the book when I was in the store, and Chapter Stacks had said, had just really made it sound interesting as well, so I'm looking forward to picking that one up. Next is Rebel Bully Geek Pariah by Erin Jade Lang. This is a book that I actually saw on Becca from Becca Awesome Book Nuts anticipated February releases video, and this book is described as being like The Breakfast Club, and I absolutely freaking love The Breakfast Club, so I was really excited to pick this up. I believe it's about 4 really different teenagers, I presume a rebel, a geek, etc., who are all at the same party, and then the party gets busted by the cops, and so they all pile into the same car to make a getaway, but then the night takes kind of an unpredictable turn, and they're all kind of forced to spend a lot of time together following on from that. I don't really know too much more than that, but it sounds really interesting, and anything that is compared to The Breakfast Club, I am going to check out. Next is Far From You by Tess Sharp. This is a book that I actually saw Nicole Craswell talk about in her, I believe it was her January wrap-up, and it just sounded really interesting. It is about a girl who has been battling with addiction, and her best friend is murdered, but everyone else thinks it was just like that she was killed in kind of a drug deal gone wrong, but she knows that she was deliberately murdered, but no one believes her because of her addiction, and I think she's kind of forced into rehab even though she has beaten the addiction. It just sounded really, really interesting. It's kind of an interesting premise. It's not something I've heard, like a lot of books are about this kind of topic. So I do think it will be really interesting to pick up. So yeah, I'm excited to look into it. Next is Seed by Lisa Heathfield. This is a book that was actually recommended to me by Eleanor from Eleanor Reads Books. She saw my January wrap-up and noticed that I mentioned that I really enjoyed books surrounding cults, and so she suggested this book to me as something that she enjoyed that is surrounding cults. Obviously, I don't know too much about it, obviously, except that it does surround cults, but I am really excited to pick it up, and if she enjoyed it, then that's like a great recommendation, because as I've said, while I enjoy the topic of cults and I'm always really excited to pick them up, I'm usually disappointed, so hopefully this one breaks that curse. Next we have Blackheath by Gabriella Lepore. This is a book that I actually saw Girl Reading talking about in her January wrap-up, and I believe it follows a girl who has always kind of been really unlucky, and then she goes to, I think it's a carnival, and a fortune teller there tells her that she's been cursed, and that's why she's really unlucky. And so I believe she has to kind of get involved with witches, which we all know how much I love witches, to kind of break the curse, and it just sounded like something that would be right up my alley, so I definitely want to check it out and see whether I love it or not. Next, we have Harry Potter and the Cursed Child by J.K. Rowling. I don't think I need to explain to you why I marked this book as to read. I have never been so excited for a book release in my whole life. I couldn't believe it when I woke up. I actually saw it on Facebook and I thought I was dreaming. Like, I am so excited about this release, just like so many people are. I will buy it immediately and read it immediately as soon as I can get my hands on it. I just cannot wait. So yeah, that this one was going on my to read. The next 2 books are books that I actually saw on an Instagram post from Epic Reads. The first of those is The Word for Yes by Claire Needle. This is a book that I'm not 100% what it's about, but I know that it deals with rape, and that is an issue that I find really interesting and I enjoy like kind of reading about. I believe it follows 3 sisters who have kind of become estranged as they've gotten older. They're still like kind of in their teenage years, I believe, but they are quite estranged. I'm not exactly sure how rape delves into the story, but I do understand that that's what it's about. And the title, The Word for Yes, also kind of leads me to believe that. So I just thought this sounded interesting, and I look forward to maybe picking it up soon. The second of the books from the Epic Reads Instagram post is Take the Fall by Emily Hainsworth. This is a book, a YA book that I believe deals with a girl who, her and her best friend were kind of in the forest or somewhere like that, and she leaves the forest, but her best friend is found murdered at the bottom. I believe she's found at the bottom of a waterfall, and they believe that she's murdered, and it's kind of, I guess, follows the mystery of who murdered her friend. I believe she gets involved to try help clear the name of one of the suspects who comes to her for help, and it just sounded really interesting. And yeah, I definitely think that this is the type of book that even if it's not 100% great, I'll probably enjoy it. So yeah, I definitely marked it as to read. The next book that I marked as to read is Starflight by Melissa Landers. This is a book that I've just heard quite a bit about on BookTube over the last month, and it just sounded really interesting, and I thought I'd probably enjoy it. I don't read a lot of sci-fi, but this is more like kind of contemporary sci-fi, I think. But it just sounded really interesting. I believe this follows a girl who is kind of an ex-felon, and she wants to kind of go to these other set of planets to kind of escape the kind of, labels that she's been given because of her past. And the only way for her to get there is to work on a spaceship that is, I think, owned or like run or captained by like her like worst enemy from high school. It just sounds really interesting. I've heard really good things about it on BookTube, so yeah, I think I'll enjoy it. I haven't read Melissa Lander's other books, but that doesn't never stop me before, so yeah, I look forward to checking this one out. Next, we have The Boy in the Striped Pajamas by John Boyne. This is a book that I've obviously heard a lot about in the past, but the thing that pushed me to finally mark it as to read was actually Aoife's monthly recommendations video for books that didn't contain a romantic storyline. I've always been interested in this book, and I had just never marked it as to read before, but hearing her talk about it, and then I looked up on Goodreads and marked it as to read. This is a book that follows a little boy during World War II who befriends a little boy who is on the other side of a fence because he is in a Jewish kind of death camp. So yeah, I know that this book's going to be really, really sad, so I definitely will have to mentally prepare my soul before I pick this one up, but I definitely think it will be a book worth reading. Next is All She Ever Wanted by Rosalind Noonan. This is a book that was actually recommended to me by a viewer. She watched my February mid-month wrap-up, I believe it was, and heard me talking about Darkest Place by Jay Ford, and mentioned that this book was very similar to that. And I really enjoyed that book. And I've actually read another book by Rosalind Noonan in the past that I quite enjoyed. I believe that was called Take Another Look, although don't hold me to that. And so I thought, well, I've enjoyed this author in the past. It sounds like it's very similar to a book that I have enjoyed, so I marked it as to read. I don't know too much about it except that it is similar to Darkest Place, but I'm excited to maybe check it out in the future. The last 3 books that I have to mention are all books that I saw actually on a post on Pinterest that was to do with books that had plot twists. I don't always like to know that a book has a plot twist going in, but to be honest, when I finally get around to picking these up, I probably won't remember that that's why I marked it as to read, so it doesn't bother me too much, and they all sound really interesting, and so I decided to check them out, obviously. The first of those is The Dive from Clawson's Pier by Anne Packer. I believe this one follows a young woman who has kind of grown up with kind of a best friend and kind of a childhood sweetheart, and she's kind of starting to feel a bit suffocated by that life, and has been really seriously considering breaking up with her long-term boyfriend. And then her boyfriend is severely injured. I believe he's paralyzed in some kind of diving accident, and so I think the book kind of questions from there whether she can leave him, whether she needs to stick by him, things of that nature. It just sounded really interesting, and so yeah, I wanted to check it out. Next, we have Lost Among the Living by Simone St. James. I believe this one is a historical fiction set in post-World War I England. A woman has been widowed through the war, and she becomes a companion, I believe, for an older relative or something like that. And then some kind of weird things start happening, I believe. It may have a bit of haunting qualities, I'm not 100% sure, but it does sound really interesting and I want to check it out. And the final book that I have to talk about is Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, a Savannah Story by John Berendt. This is, I believe, actually a non-fiction, so I'm not really sure how a plot twist is woven into a non-fiction book, but I'm definitely interested to find out. I believe this book follows I don't know if it was a mass shooting, but some kind of shooting in Savannah in the 1980s, and it just sounds really interesting, and the fact that it's a non-fiction with a plot twist really, really intrigued me, so I really am excited to check this one out. So those are all the books that I have marked as to read since my last marked as to read video. I hope you guys like me talking about some of these different books. I don't know when I'll actually get to any of these books. Some of them I'll probably get to sooner rather than later, and some of them I may not get to for a while, but they are all books that have intrigued me throughout the month, so I wanted to talk to you guys about them. I would love to know your thoughts on any of these, if you've read them or if they sound exciting to you, or any books that you're really excited to pick up and that you've marked as to read. I would love to chat in the comments to you guys down below. Please like this video if you liked it. Please subscribe if you want to see more. But that's all I've got for this video today. Bye guys!